Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. In this episode of Canadian Content, we're going to be covering a few stories. The first of which is the University of Guelph has released a report detailing how the carbon tax is going to cost the Canadian society hundreds of thousands of jobs, shrink the overall economy by practically 7%, and cost individual taxpayers $6,700. Next, we'll go to a story about CSIS. They have appointed a new temporary head. This temporary head has authored a report saying that parental rights advocates are domestic terrorists, extremists, and a threat to the country as a large. In Halifax, the Hamas supporters have interrupted yet another pride parade, and we're going to look at how come the media isn't covering it very well and why Hamas can interrupt the pride parade, but if Christians were to do so, it would be a horrible thing. And last but not least, we're going to talk about Trudeau taking a vacation because he's so overworked, you understand. Despite the fact that 70% of Canadians cannot take a vacation, Justin Trudeau has and his family will fly to British Columbia and be on vacation for the next 2 weeks. However, before we get into it, I would encourage you all to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this channel with all of your socials. I have an open GoFundMe, and I have memberships for those of you that are looking to support the channel further. The Trudeau government's climate plan will cost Canadian workers $6,700 annually by 2030, cut national employment by 164,000 jobs, and fail to achieve the emissions reduction target, according to a new study by the University of Guelph economist Ross McKittrick. In the report, McKittrick says the government's plan will significantly hurt Canada's economy and cost workers money and jobs. This poorly designed plan, which will worsen the current downward trends in productivity and income, will reduce emissions but at a cost many times higher than the government's estimated benefits, predicting it will reduce Canada's gross domestic product by 6.2%. McKittrick goes on to say that mitigating factors are there are 140 programs related to climate change that the government has implemented, not just the carbon tax, but 139 other programs which are costing and hacking and shutting down left, right, and center. Stephen Guilbeault has committed 200 billion Canadian tax dollars to the environment programs, even though the programs up to now have only reduced emissions by 707 million tons, which are still higher than they were in 2005. One of the other issues is the large number of different policies testifies more to an overall lack of focus than to a commitment to optimal policy making. And I think that is really narrows down to people who don't know what they're doing. So they just hack, and hope that something sticks. And really all that's sticking is the destruction of the economy. We can't even take vacations, even though all of the ministers are flying around paying our tax dollars, even though we're spending millions of dollars on programs that will never achieve the goals that they claim, while other countries are investing billions in using carbon and burning it and turning on electricity with it. McKittrick estimates the federal climate change plan will cut Canada's emissions by 26% compared to the 2005 levels. So when you consider all of the countries that are industrializing as we speak, the 2005 level is not going to be anywhere near what the 2030 level will be. So what we've done so far will have no impact, no touch, will not change anything. And we're destroying ourselves for it. To be the only people in the world that are trying to make this virtue signal in climate change mean anything at all. Because the rest of the world wants electricity. The rest of the world wants to live like they do in the United States. And really, that's what we need to be doing. We need to be exporting technology to other countries so that we can make them do things clean, and then we can all sort of catch up one step at a time. Instead of this 140 program hack and slash hysteria that we see coming out of the federal liberals and their overlords in Davos. The Strategical Review of World Energy reported last month that the global industrial greenhouse gas emissions rose by 2% in 2023 compared to 2022, exceeding 40 billion ton of carbon dioxide equivalent for the first time. So we're doing all of this for nothing. I mean, we are a small population, And we are doing all of this, and it went higher, 2% higher than it was in 2023. How much higher is that than it was in 2005? How much higher is that? If it's 2% higher than 2022, where was it in 2005? It's probably 50 times higher. For the first time ever, despite all of our efforts, it broke 40 billion ton. So when you hear the federal government talking to you about how they took 7 million tons out of the air, compared to 40 billion, it's nothing. And I would get it if it was being effective, but we're killing ourselves for this. And it's doing nothing. Canada's spy agency, also known as CSIS, has selected an interim leader. Her name is Vanessa Lloyd. She is supposed to be there for 6 months while they try to find somebody to replace her. Oftentimes, this is the way that the government will try to end run. They'll say, well, she's already been there for 6 months, so let's just give her the job. I think that they would have had trouble vetting her based on the fact that she authored a report claiming that one of the greatest threats to Canadians' domestic security is not IRGC, it's not China, it's not Chinese police stations, it's not people coming across the border illegally, it's not cyber attacks. Nope, it's parental rights advocates, people who believe that parents should have the right to be involved in their children's lives, are the number one domestic threat to Canada. If you can imagine that. If you can wrap your mind around the fact that somebody who just wants to make sure that their child is healthy is somehow the threat, despite all of the other threats in this country and all of the other threats that Canada faces, this is the one that she has chosen to write a report about and to get passionate about. Not only has she decided to get passionate about it, she has likened these groups of parental rights advocates to Nazis, which I find really extreme, especially when you consider that Nazis are far left. They're the socialists. It's right in the name, right? National socialists. That's what Nazis are. And because of that, that makes them far left. So I don't know why people always try to lump them in with people who don't agree with them, but I think that they don't. I think that despite being this high and having this much authority, she's not necessarily educated. She might be a good cop or she might be good at that kind of stuff, but her personal blinders have become so muddled that she has elected to target parents as opposed to target the IRGC. I mean, that to me is a gross misunderstanding of the nature of her job. She can have her opinions as she likes, but her job is not to target parents who don't agree with other parents on how children should be addressed when they're dealing with internalized mechanisms. Her job is to worry about keeping people safe from spies. And in her mind, those spies are called parents, and they live in the middle class, and they worry about whether or not their children are safe. How do we end up being this kind of a country? Can you imagine the people in China hearing that this is her number one concern, the spy agency in China? Can you imagine the response of the laughter that must be running through the room when they envision coming up against the overall prowess of a person who's more fixated on somebody saying, I want to know if my child's taking gender altering hormones, versus I'm going to put that dissident into this secret room over here and we're going to get them to change their tune, and then you'll never see them again because we sent them to a re-education camp. I can't even understand. It's like, I mean, clown doesn't even begin to cover it, in my opinion. So sticking with the theme of liberal hypocrisy, another pride parade was disrupted, this one in Halifax, by pro-Hamas demonstrators. And I am forced to ask why the pro-Hamas demonstrators were not forcibly removed, why they were not threatened with hate crime legislation. Because if these were Christians who were trying to interfere with the Pride Parade, if these were anyone trying to interfere with the Pride Parade based on stopping what the Pride Parade represents, which is exactly what these pro-Hamas protesters have done, they want to disrupt the Pride Parade and tell the Pride Parade that they're not allowed to deal with Israel. Just because it's not attacking the way that they celebrate their life behind closed doors doesn't mean that they're not attacking them as people. So how come they can get away with it? But if it was a Christian group saying, whatever Christian groups like to say, there would be police there would be SWAT teams there would be cameras there would be, mentions of hate crimes and legislation and all that kind of stuff. How come it's okay for one but not for another? I don't agree with this at all. I think that this is the kind of thing that Canadians need to call out. If you want to have your position, that's fine. But your position cannot be applied to some and not all, because that's not a position, that's a privilege. You're no longer talking about having a belief. You're talking about being privileged. You're talking about allowing people to do things that other people are not permitted to do, which goes directly and 100% in the face of your claim that you're trying to be diverse and inclusive and all of that stuff. Now, if you want to be diverse and inclusive, fine. I have no issue with those words. I do have an issue with you applying them differently to different groups of people, though. 100% disagree with that logic. Pro-Hamas protesters disrupted this year's Halifax Pride Parade on Saturday. More than 100 organizations and groups participated in the parade that shut down much of downtown Halifax and saw people lining the streets. Much of the parade was over when a small group of protesters ran into the middle of the road and forced the procession to halt. Apparently, there was a small altercation between the two groups, and the police decided to break that up. I don't know who the police have to support in a situation like when the far left chews on its own, when it eats its own tail. I would say this only, that there's nothing far left about Hamas. There's absolutely nothing socialist about a group like that. And I can tell you that there is still going to be people in that parade who say to themselves now, well, I had to not march in the parade because Hamas blocked the road and the civilian authorities did nothing to protect me. We're already talking about a group that says that civilian authorities don't do enough for them. And now you've endorsed that problem because you can't keep the roads clear, because you can't apply the law and the rules equally. It doesn't matter who got in their way. They should have been dragged out of the middle of the street, because that is what you would have done had it been a group of Christian missionaries, condemning them all to the whatever, you know what I mean? Like just saying that they were horrible people in general. That's exactly what you would have done to them. So you have to do that to all, or you have to permit Christian missionaries and any other group that doesn't agree with them to block their road every time one of these parades go off. You can't have rules for some groups and not other groups. You have to have rules for all the groups all the time. That's what laws are. If they do not apply equally, then we might as well be living in apartheid, because they are applied specifically to different groups of people based on, instead of it being skin tone like in apartheid, it's just the way that they feel or the way that they celebrate their own sexuality. And who are we to allow our government to lead us down this roadway? Who are we to allow local, municipal, provincial, federal governments to apply the laws differently depending on your mindset? Does that sound like freedom to you? Does it sound like democracy to you? Does that sound like the country you want your children or your family to be a part of? I'm just asking you to think your way through that, because to me, my issue is that the law is not being applied evenly. And I think that Canadians have to apply the law evenly. And if the people who are in charge are not applying the law evenly, those people need to be removed. Simple and plain. Of course, to save the best for last, Justin Trudeau and his family head to British Columbia for a vacation in an unnamed location. You are not allowed to have a vacation. The Conservatives spent a month begging the federal Liberals to stop the carbon tax so that Canadians could go on a vacation. But Justin Trudeau can fly 4 or 5 planes across the country because the security team, all of those vehicles, all of the staff that have to be accompanying with him. It's not like he does his own cooking. It's not like him in a pair of flip-flops. He brings an entire staff with him to do all of the cooking, all of the cleaning, probably has his own doctor with him. And those people are all getting picked up by the company tab. You can't have a vacation to go see your cousin one city over that you haven't seen in 4 years because you just simply can't afford to take the time off. But Justin Trudeau is so stressed out by being the leader of the government that he has to take a 2-week vacation in the middle of the summer at your expense and not even going to let you know where he went. Prime Minister Trudeau will head to British Columbia on Sunday, where he will be on vacation with his family until August 1st. Spokesman Mohammed Hussein said that Trudeau travels on government aircraft as required and will reimburse the equivalent of the commercial airline ticket for himself and for his family, but not for the RCMP officers, not for all the vehicles, because when he travels, it's not one plane. The vehicles go on a different plane. That's why everywhere you go, he has those same SUVs. They travel with him. They leave that part out of the press release because they don't want you to understand that the amount of carbon these guys are burning just so that they can have the privilege of moving around the country, while they tell you that you have to pay up to 60 cents a liter extra. They don't like you to be reminded of that. They don't want you to be reminded of the fact that you don't have the money to take a vacation. You haven't had a vacation in years. The only vacation that you might be willing to be able to get is when you get kicked out of your apartment and have to sleep on the street. But they cannot miss it. Justin Trudeau takes a vacation in the wintertime. He takes a vacation in the summertime. He takes personal days off. Worrying about whether or not Canadians are living a good life, worrying about the overcrowding in Toronto, worrying about any of that. Oh, no. I'm on vacation. I'm going surfing in British Columbia with my children. Now, the article goes on about how don't worry, he's being ethical. He's paying for it himself. Well, what does it matter? He's not paying for it out of his pocket for all of the other people, and he should not be taking a vacation. I mean, it's not a good look. When you stood in the House of Commons and decided that you wouldn't allow people to have a break on the carbon tax and just take like a weekend to themselves, and then you decide that you're taking 2 weeks off in the summertime during one of the worst economic crises that Canada has seen in 50 years, during one of the worst housing crises they have ever seen. I mean, choose your moments, bud. You don't just say, well, I'll just take the end of July off. And because, that's 6 months since I've been to Jamaica for my Christmas vacation. And, the 4-day weekend I took on May 2 for, and the time I took at Easter. And come on, bud. I think that it wouldn't have cost you anything to signal to Canadians that you're not taking a vacation, because you know that they're suffering and you're doing everything in your power to make that go away. You have done nothing but stop thinking about the Canadians so that you can make these problems be solved. But instead you say, don't worry about it. I am going to get them to take off a couple of $100 off my check so that I can tell you that I paid for everybody's seat. It's an unbelievable disconnect between the reality, and the more you look at it, I mean, this is a leadership that thinks you're here to serve them, not the other way around. All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you all for listening. I'll talk to you next time.